Welcome to the Beyond Atheism podcast, with me, Nathan Alexander, and my co-host, Todd Tavares. This podcast moves beyond questions of God's existence to ask, what's next in a godless world? If you're enjoying the show so far, remember to like and subscribe, rate and review, and consider supporting us on Patreon. Beyond Atheism is produced and distributed by Atheist United Studios.
The Beyond Atheism podcast has often discussed how non-religious people organize and how these organizations function. Today, we're talking about one that has been highly successful in both numbers and impact. With over 100,000 members, the Norwegian Humanist Association is one of the largest secular humanist organizations in the world. It's also large in terms of influence in shaping a more secular society. Joining us today to explain how this came to be is Christian Lomsdalen. Christian is the president of the Norwegian Humanist Association. He's also a PhD candidate in the study of religions at the University of Bergen, as well as a high school teacher. Christian, welcome to Beyond Atheism.
Thank you very much for having me here.
That's great. I'm glad you can join us, and I hope I didn't butcher your last name too much.
Absolutely, it was okay.
Christian, thanks so much for joining us. So you have the honor of being the first guest we've had from Norway. Can you tell us, where are you in Norway, and what should people know about the religious situation there in Norway?
I live in Bergen, which is on the west coast of Norway. I'm not from here, but I have been living here for the last 10 or so years. But I tend to say that I'm a first generation Bergensian, so I'm not moving anywhere at this point. Religious-wise, Norway is quite a divided country. Not divided in the sense that we often think about the polarized people disagreeing with each other in the way we often talk about the American religious system or the American political system. But it's divided in a sense that the statistics and what people report in censuses is not it's not the same picture. So if you look at it through the lens of the statistics and membership in organizations, Norway is a highly Christian nation with around 70% of the population members of a church or a congregation of some sort from a Christian perspective, where we find that 65% of the population is member of the Norwegian state church. So that is the statistics. And there we also find that we have 2% of the population as members. But at the same time, yeah, we do. So it's quite a lot of people. The number actually I got because we have a board meeting at Friday. So I got the newest numbers now, and we have 129,908 members at the moment we're speaking.
Right.
You need 2 more.
No, 82 more.
Oh.
All right.
That's important.
So much for my paying attention and doing math.
Yeah, but if we look at how people answer in censuses, it's just about 30% of the population that will say that they believe in a God.
Wow.
And around 48-50% of the population will say that their worldview is similar to or close to a humanist life stance without a belief in a God. So in a census, people will answer quite differently from what their membership status is.
They actually take membership? That's in America, that's not something that's really done. I don't think there's no registry of religion.
Well, there is a difference between the American system with intended separation of church and state and the Norwegian system, where the state is having an active part in financing and being foundational on many levels for also for religious organizations and life stance organizations. So since we have funding from the government for churches, for mosques, for humanistic organizations, we have to report how many members we have.
Ah, I see. So your funding is directly dependent on how many people you have, even for
Yes,
the
it is.
humanists.
Or that is the easy explanation, but yes. The state says that each member in our organization is worth this amount of money,
Mhm.
and then they calculate how much money that is.
Mm.
But at the same time, this number, how they derive on this number, is by taking all the money they give to the Norwegian state church, removing some parts of this money that goes to funding renovations on really old churches,
Mm.
and then dividing it on how many members the Norwegian state church has, and so they
Mm.
find how much the rest of us is worth.
I see. That's pretty convoluted. So you would make more money if they had fewer members.
Yes, we will.
Wow.
And every year they lose a percentage point or more in their
Mm.
membership basis, but they get more money from the state.
Mm-hmm. So
Oh, right,
those
right.
members are
Which,
constantly worth more money.
yeah, so this is good for the rest of us and for the organizations and churches outside of the Norwegian state church. But this way to do the financing is not. The system will break down in a couple of years when there's too few members in the Norwegian state church, and the value of members in other congregations, churches, and life stance organizations will be too much. So this system is not it's not a good basis for a future system.
No. In the US, I think in North America, churches have developed kind of an opposite system where they figure out the price of a soul, which I think is how they describe it, where it's like it's the recruiting fee, right? Like how much do you need to pay for each person for it to be worth it? But so it looks very, very different there. Were you a member of the state church growing up, or have you always been humanist?
No, I started out being a Christian. So were a part of my local congregation in a Norwegian state church. In more or less, I went a couple of times a year, so not an active member, but I
Mm-hmm.
were part of it. And I chose to be baptized, and I chose to be confirmed.
Wow.
And afterwards, I realized that I did not have a faith in the supernatural part of the religion. But I really like the stories, though.
Okay, right.
Uh,
So what led you to leave or to realize you no longer believed?
it was a slow realization. So it wasn't any particular happening, which makes it difficult to say that it was a turning point on or of some kind. But I have always been interested in religion, so reading the Bible, reading the Quran, and so on. So
Wow.
I
Yeah.
probably was a part of it.
Yeah. And it sounds
Yes,
like
right.
you still like the stories. Is
Oh,
it
I really do.
Do you
And
have a
my favorite
favorite?
is the ones about Joseph and Daniel, the two different story sets, of course. But that is my favorite story sets in the Bible.
Wow. Do you often read it? How often do you go back to it?
Not anymore. I used to do it a couple of times a year or something, but at the moment it has been more rarely. But
Yeah.
I do listen to podcasts about reading the Bible, which is quite interesting, where I often find like the points where I'm interested and thinking about it more than reading it. So it's uh, I thought about becoming a theologian, but I figured out it was too few work opportunities, so I
Right.
went into
Yes.
academia instead.
Right.
Oh man,
Yeah.
that's saying a
Yeah.
lot.
Which is
Yeah.
yeah. Um,
Maybe in Norway
yeah.
you get too few opportunities for that. But so how much did that lend itself to a connection to the Norwegian humanists? When you said, okay, like faith isn't for me anymore, but I still have this affinity for the stories. I still love reading about religion. I still love thinking about this stuff. Like, did that lead you to the humanists, or was there a different track away from religion that was than to the humanists?
That was probably a different track altogether. I realized that I was an atheist and I wanted to become a teacher on the confirmation part, since I'm educated a teacher and I'm interested in religion, and I figuring out that I'm an atheist, I wanted to become a part of the confirmation teaching for the humanist organization. And so I became a member of the Norwegian Humanist Association. And that is also because I like to be a part of groups and I like to be a member of organizations that I agree with. So it felt natural to become a member and then become a confirmation
Right.
teacher.
Right. And then, like, so when did you join, and then how did you become the president?
Yeah.
Actually, I joined in 2012. So I have been a member for a little over 10 years now, and I've been the confirmation teacher for most of that time. So that has been quite rewarding and quite fruitful. And becoming the president, well, I have been writing a lot of I think it's called op-eds in the American
Mhm.
newspapers,
Yeah.
about topics that are important in the Norwegian humanist setting: religion and schools, separation of church and state, and so on. And been working with creating debates, creating lectures, and so on in my hometown. I've been working through that, and well, somebody thought that I had potential, and they included me in the national board. And now each period in the board runs for 2 years. So now, 3 periods later, I ended up being the president.
Wow.
So I'm very thankful and humble for the confidence that people have put in me through
Wow.
that.
It's this sounds like a pretty impressive organization. Like already we've heard like there's you're the president, there's a board, there's confirmation classes. It's not just a social gathering, is it? What is the or maybe we should start back in the beginning. It was founded in 1956. At the
And
time,
this is quite fun though,
whoa,
because
which part?
uh, the organization started in 1956. That is
Mhm.
correct.
Yeah.
But they had already been doing the confirmation classes since 1951.
How does that work? How do you do it before you're
They started a separate organization that was called the Association for Civic Confirmations, which were doing the confirmation since 1951. And then the same people, more or less the same people, found out that they wanted other humanist ceremonies, rituals, and organizations. So they started the Norwegian Humanist Association,
so
and then incorporated the confirmations into this.
they have these rituals first and build an organization around it. It sort of
Yeah.
leads to that creation. So tell us about the confirmation process. What is this? I mean, you're the instructor, so
Yeah.
you know it best.
This is yes.
And I want to let you know why the confirmations was important first, because that is this must sound strange if you're not from Northern Europe, where confirmations is a rather big part of the culture, or has been a big part of the culture. Because until 1912, it was obligatory for Norwegian citizens to be confirmed in the Norwegian state church. So this was something that everyone did. It was not something that was really optional, and you could go to jail for not being confirmed in the Norwegian state church. So the tradition was it was thriving. Everybody did it, and it was kind of socially awkward not to be confirmed. So when Christian Horn, who was the founder of both of these organizations, together with some other people, he had his daughter becoming the age of being confirmed. And he said that if it doesn't exist an alternative when you are going to have your confirmation, I will create the alternative. And well, he needed to create the alternative. So it started with 34 confirmants the first year in Oslo in 1951. And now we have about 14,000 or maybe 15,000 confirmants this year.
Wow. Wow.
Wow. Wow.
And so, what exactly? What does the confirmation consist of? What do you have to agree to certain theological views to be confirmed within the humanists, or
That would be really interesting what we should choose as the theological dogmas. But no, everyone can participate in the Norwegian confirmations. Earlier, it was or in the humanist confirmations. Earlier, it was like 20% had parents that were members of the organization, and the rest came from outside of the organization. Now it's about 70% is members of has parents that are members of the organization. But it consists of classes for about 20, 22, 25 hours. And some does this like intensive during 3 days or 4 days. Some does this 2 hours every week for 11, 12 weeks. And some does this during a holiday and goes to a camp. So it's different ways to do it. And everyone has to learn about humanism as a life stance. They have to do talks about human rights, about identity, about ethics, and critical thinking. That was the last one. And the rest of the topics is up to the confirmation instructor. So I have been choosing topics for my confirmants for quite a number of years. So that varies a lot what the rest of the topics are. And then there is a huge ceremony, which is which is the important thing for especially for the parents and for the grandparents. But for me, as a confirmant teacher and as the president of the Humanist Association, I think really the courses is the interesting part of this. That what they learn, what they reflect about, making them reflect about things. It's not, we don't really choose what they land on what decisions they make and what positions they take after their classes. But it's important for us that they reflect on things and that they start to reflect and that they start to incorporate ethical thinking into their thinking. But they might land on something completely different than the organization, and they don't need to comply to a certain worldview to be a part of this. That is very important to us.
Right. It's not very dogmatic or doctrinaire.
No, we
it's much
are
more loose fitting.
anti-dogmatic.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
But
Yeah.
this has
can't
been
be
really important
excommunicated.
for us. No, absolutely not. We don't actually have a paragraph in our bylaws to exclude anyone.
Okay. Okay. Right.
So that is important. But this has been what has kept the organization alive for many years, especially in the beginning when we did not have any state funding. And this is how people know us. And it's important for people to have the possibility to be confirmed humanistically, especially since the church numbers is falling. Because the church now only confirms about 50% of the population.
Wow.
In many places. Which is quite a radical change in the last 30 years. So this is important. So at the same time, we say that we have kept this tradition alive by having a real alternative for people.
Yeah. So at first it was a legal requirement. It's just sort of a way to get around the law.
The legal requirement stopped in 1912, and then we didn't exist until 1951.
Okay.
So.
Oh, okay. So it was really just continuing a tradition that had existed, not a legal obstruction. Wow. So, and then once it founds in 1956, how does it develop from just the ritual? Right. It sounds like you start with this ritual, you build a larger organization. What does it add to it? Does the focus change? Does it have, does it become sort of goal oriented, or is it much more about building a community?
It is both of them, actually. And I think that is important that the organization has been a provider of ceremonies for many years. At the same time, we have been an interest group or a political organization in so much that we have taking political stances that were important to our members in regarding, for example, religion and the government, and separating those two and getting more inclusive arrangements in the schools and in so that has been important all through. And At the same time, meeting places for humanists has been important, but that has become increasingly more important in the last 10, 20, 30 years. So that has evolved more gradually, but it was important, especially in the big cities in the beginning as well. But that has taken more time to develop the meeting places.
And so there's in most, well, in maybe the most major cities, there would be kind of a local humanist group there that you could join.
And now there is.
Okay, there is.
It has been quite different when you have when we were a much smaller organization, but now there is groups in most cities, or in most big cities at least. There's groups, and you will find confirmation classes all over the country. So it's
Yeah. Let's put some meat on the bones of like the political stuff, because I know you. Okay, so you had a state religion. You still have a state religion. Was it
No, we had a state religion.
had a state religion?
Now I will argue that Norway has a state church.
Okay.
But it depends on how you define a state church.
Right.
But they are more separated now than they were. That is important.
Okay, so what and how did that change come about? Because it sounds like 1912, everybody needs to get confirmed in the state church. And that breaks down. Now you still have the church, but it's not run by the government, or I guess it's funded by the government. Christian, walk us through this. How did it start? How has it changed? And how did you guys get to where you are now?
I will try to explain. Actually, the Norwegian state church did not have its own juridical entity until around 2017. It was a integrated part of the Norwegian government until the last 10 years.
So it was like a government branch until wow.
Really. So for example, in 1969, the Norwegian schools stopped being the faith teaching for the Norwegian state church. So that was something that we worked on and have been working on afterwards, how the Norwegian school system should teach religion. Should they teach just Christianity? Should they teach Christianity from an inside perspective, from a faith perspective, or should they teach it from an outside perspective? So that has been a continual fight or struggle for the entirety of the organization's time or existence. And at the same time, the Norwegian government, until in 2008, there was a big compromise in the parliament, and they decided that, okay, we are going to split the state and church. And they did quite a lot of reform in the parliamentarian periods that followed, because changing the constitution takes a lot of time. So this was prepared to be a change that were active from 2014, because that was the jubilee of the constitution, because it was written in 1814. So they changed the constitution and the church's role in this constitution from 2014, which meant that we did not longer have a state religion. But the church has its own place and mentions in the constitution, and it has its own laws and regulations that are different from other religions, other churches, and other life stance organizations. And they have less freedom to choose their own way or own path than the rest of us. So I still claim that from a political science point of view, we still have a state church, but it has more freedom and is more separated than before. So we are on the track to coming to a separation. But at the same time, the municipalities and the church, they are quite connected still.
Really?
Yeah. Because the connectedness in the Norwegian municipalities is quite large.
Does the church have much power over citizens now? Are they able to impose laws? Are they able to sort of dictate what people need to do?
No, not really. So it's a waning state church.
Right. Wow.
But they have influence, and they will be asked to come on debates, come on to participate in hearings, and they will be listened to a larger degree than the other churches and the other life stance organizations and the other religions.
So they're still kind of like they're an important either like stakeholder, or we might call them like a political agent, even though they don't necessarily have direct control over government and
They
law.
they have no control in a juridical way over law, but they have influence. So they're
Yeah.
a stakeholder and an agent. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Can see that. And what role did the Norwegian Humanists play in lessening that? Were you guys very active in creating this constitutional change?
We have been a big part of this discussion, and we have been a part of dialogue forums and been a part of the political hearings and been vocal about how we see that the governments should be working with religions and life stance organizations. So we have been a vocal part of this, but uh, we cannot either be like influencing, say that something has to change and then it will change, but the organization and the volunteers in the organizations and the employees of the organization has been working tirelessly for, well, soon to be 70 years to
Yeah.
create change and to influence change, and sometimes being part of the majority, sometimes being part of the minority in different areas, sometimes being ahead of the curve, sometimes running and trying to catch up with the curve if something changes. But for example, defending the right to abortion, defending the right for a non-confessional school system, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, just to go back sort of to the way the religions kind of intertwine with the state. Well, is the monarchy are they bound up with the state church
Wait, there's
or?
monarchy too?
Yes,
What?
we have
Oh
monarchy.
my goodness, what's going on?
uh, until 2014, which is an important
I
year,
guess.
Yeah.
the Norwegian king was the head of the church.
Okay.
Afterwards, he is the only person in Norway which does not have the right to choose his own religion.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
that is because he chose to. But at the same time, that means that his heirs do not really have an option to choose their own religion. So we need to change the constitution for the king's heirs to choose their religion.
Well, and that would take a constitutional amendment. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
but it's easier to do a constitutional amendment or change in Norway than in the US. So it sounds very hard from an American perspective. From a Norwegian perspective, it takes a lot of years and we need a lot of votes, but it's not that complicated.
Right. Yeah. And is there how old is the king? Are they set to have a new heir, or will there be a new monarch
That
relatively soon? Or I mean, obviously you can never know, I guess, but
we could never know, but at the same time, the king is now about, let's see, he was born in 1937.
Oh yeah.
So he's
Yeah.
okay,
85.
okay,
Yeah.
so okay,
Okay. Yeah.
But at the same time, his cousin, the British Queen Elizabeth, she
hmm
lived for a very long time.
that's
So
true.
And
Yes,
they're
yes.
cousins? Are you serious? This is man.
all of
Monarchy
them are
is
related.
so weird.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
They,
know the
they belong,
Windsors are
all
really
of,
German. It's a very strange
yeah,
thing.
and they all belong to the same North German House of Princes. So
mm.
they're
That's
Wow.
fascinating.
That's
Yeah.
wacky. This we
Mm.
could take this afield. I would just like to point out that, the flip side of monarchy that makes it terrible is that the king loses their freedom. All the royalty
Yeah,
lose their
right.
freedom.
Yeah, yeah.
They're the only people who have a religion chosen for them. That doesn't seem quite fair. So your organization, okay, another thing, Christian, with we're thinking about where you guys are today. You're already really big and you keep getting bigger. How is that happening? How did you guys get so big, and how do you grow now? That's
Uh, Earlier, we used to say that we got new members when the Norwegian State Church did, well, stupid things. When they did something
Mm, yes,
controversial
yeah.
or
yes.
conservative, and they
Mhm.
spoke out against LGBT people, female priests, and so on, then we got new members. And we have been growing quite steadily until a couple of years ago. It's a couple of thousand new members a year, giving some possibilities for a bit cheaper confirmations, for example, if people were a member. And we have been growing like steadily, working upwards. So that has been quite interesting. But at the same time, a lot of people, around 10% of their population, says that they identify with the Norwegian Humanist Association. So it and by having 2% of these people, or 2% of the population as members, means that we have a lot of potential that we haven't touched upon. So of some reason we haven't been so interesting to be a part of, to be a member of, as an organization, than people be agreeing with us. So we have been focusing a lot on all the good we do, and we are trying to develop chaplaincy services, for example, in schools, not schools, in hospital, universities, prisons, and so on, and trying to show all the good things that we do and talk more about what we do as an organization than relying on the church to do
Right.
unpopular stuff.
Yeah.
And that has
Yes.
really
Yeah.
been paying off. So
Mm,
people,
mm,
to a large degree, has become members of the organizations. We have been a normal thing. We have become a normal organizations
Mm.
for people to be a member of, more than we used to be, and that has been quite important.
Yeah. Is it so for the in the US, the numbers of the non-religious are growing everywhere, right? It's not really bound by space. It's not really bound by age, except that there are a lot more young people who identify as non-religious, right? Old people are also becoming less religious, but young people are a majority. A
We
majority
see
of
the
young
same in
people are.
Norway.
Same way. So is that where most of the growth is coming from? Is it mostly young people?
I think that the growth in the years where we were growing steadily but slowly, it was the general trend that it had to do with the generational shift. So we were growing with a little bit every year, and people were more inclined to become a members in their 30s, 40s, 50s, when they had children that went to school, and they saw the troubles they had with religion in schools and so on. But at the becoming more available as an organization, and we have been attracting more members that were younger than we used to. So now they are in the end of their 20s and the beginning of their 30s, and of course in their 40s when they have children going to confirmations.
Of course, of course. And you talked all you just mentioned that like you're focusing on all of the things that you do. What tell us what's your the sales pitch? What are all the things that you do? And I mean like and man, because we know about the confirmation. What are the
And
other
the
things you do?
confirmations are really
Yes.
important as a part of this, because the ceremonies, people, uh, a lot of people need the traditional ceremonies and rituals, and the rites de passage that we do throughout our lives, and that is important for most people. And that is the same for me. I make a tradition of everything, so I want
Mhm.
to ev- every year I want to do the same things for Christmas,
Mm,
and I want to do the same things for our national holidays, and I want to eat certain kind of meals on the specific time of year. So people are traditionalistic
right.
creatures.
Yeah.
So and to have the possibility to have the confirmations and have the name giving ceremonies, and to have their wedding as a humanist
Mm.
ceremony instead of something they don't believe in,
Hmm.
and that can be quite difficult when older traditions tells you have to get married in a church,
Yeah.
which was the normal way to do it in Norway
Mm.
until quite recently. And you would have to stand up there and lie about something, and then because they ask you a
Yeah.
question, do you say yes to this in front of this deity? And that, at least for my part, that is quite difficult to do. And to have the possibility to do all these ceremonies is an important part of it. And by having been growing as an organization, we have been able to provide a community in more places, having events, having meeting places, having regular activities. And that is important to grow as an organization, because people actually like to be part of a community.
Mm.
And that is my favorite thing about church, really, that you meet somebody every Sunday.
Yeah.
And then you eat cake and you drink coffee, and it's really low effort participation.
Hmm. Yeah. And do you have something similar to, like, to Humanists? Is your organization? Do you have kind of weekly events that are almost like church meetings, or no,
Not
not
like
quite?
church
Okay.
meetings,
Uh-huh. But
but
in the same way of sort of a regular once a week
s-
kind of thing, or
some places in Norway we have like they have like a weekly humanist cafe where they meet up at a cafe, and then they talk to the people that shows up, and then they drink coffee and they connect and they create this bond that is important for the community. Other places they have different activities on a more or less regular basis. And in the part of Norway where I live, we have weekly bridge nights and chess clubs meetings, and we have a group of seniors that meet, and then so different activities that happens every week, but maybe not activities that are like a church or a open space to meet up. But I want us to become better at creating this community of spaces also outside of the big towns, because I think that is important. But at the same time, most people do live in a big town.
Yeah, yeah, that's how it goes. That's where the people are. But this is an incredible balance between sort of this social organization, right? We can get together and play chess. We can get together and have rituals, and one that's active in education and politics. And you also mentioned chaplains. How does that work?
We are trying to develop a system or an standard for having chaplains in the Norwegian, in the institutions, for example in the defense, uh, because traditionally it has just been priests that has been doing this, priests in the Norwegian state church. All the hospital priests, all the hospital chaplains were priests, all the defense chaplains were priests, all the prison chaplains were priests, and all the university chaplains were priests. And in a community that's supposed to be pluralistic, that is supposed to be open to different religions and worldview, and where the statistics are changing, and where people are reporting that they have different uh, quantities of worldviews represented in the population. This cannot just stay the same with just the Norwegian church having the possibility to have these positions in these institutions. So we have been working to find out what is a humanist chaplain, where we have been learning, for example, from our Dutch and Belgium neighbors, because they have had this for quite a number of years. And we're trying to figure out what should they do, how should they proceed things, should we be in the army, should we not. There are ethical considerations about being in the army that are not present because we should be in the prisons. But being in the army has different implications, and we landed on we should be in the army as well, because it's important that the soldiers that are there has the possibility to come to a humanist chaplain. So at the moment, we have two army chaplains that are humanists, and there's about I'm not sure about the number, but around 50 Christian army chaplains.
Wow.
Right,
Well, how long did that
right.
take to get 2 humanist chaplains into the army?
I would say that we have been quite successful because both of those two has come in the last 2 years, and we have, or last 4 years actually, and we have been just having this as an active position in the organizations for the last 5 years. So,
Yeah.
well, quite fast and not fast enough is the
Yeah.
same thing. And we have 2 humanist chaplains in hospitals across Norway, with more or less the same number of Christian chaplains in the same institutions
Mm.
as in the army. So
Mm.
50 to 2.
Yeah.
Right, right, yes.
And we recently just hired our first the prison hired their first humanist chaplain.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And
All right. Yeah.
yeah. What
Because
are
all of these, or most of these, are employed by the institution they are hired to be a part of.
Mm. And are you the ones who I don't even know what it would be. Would it be ordaining? How do you is there a word for it? I'm guessing it doesn't translate.
No, it doesn't translate. I know the word you're trying to say, and I know it in Norwegian. But we have said that they need to have these and these skills and this education and so on, and then we are the sending organization, and then we have the host institutions. And I'm luckily not part of the hiring processes, so I wouldn't know.
right. So what are the qualifications then to become a chaplain? Can anyone do it, or do you need some kind of background?
They are mostly philosophical practitioners at the moment, but probably it will be available for other educational backgrounds as well. But when these institutional chaplains have traditionally had quite long education, it is important for them to be taken seriously that they also have more or less the same educational status, because the priests in Norway has 6 years of education in the Norwegian state church, and that gives a lot of credibility in a lot of these positions and a lot of training. So they are philosophical practitioners for the most part, from what I can see.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I also wanted to ask on a different note one thing we see in North America, I guess, is sort of just a whole bunch of different groups fighting for members, and there's a lot of overlap between the different groups. And I wonder what is the case in Norway, if the Norwegian Humanists, if they are kind of the main group, or are there other atheist and secular groups in Norway too?
As being a life stance organization, we are quite the dominant one in the market by the lack of the other words for it. But there are another humanist organization which is called the Humanists. But this is a life stance organization open for humanists that believe in God and does not believe in God. So it is a different kind of humanism in some degree. So it's some overlap in membership, but as in potential membership, I would rather say. And but the Venn diagram doesn't cover entirely. So they are considering themselves to be more open than us.
Mm. Well, are you closed off to people who believe in God? Is that a firm thing?
We state in our bylaws that we are an organization that are non-theistic.
Mm.
So we state that in our bylaws, but we don't exclude anyone. So if they want to be a part of an organization that says that they are non-theistic, well, that is okay for us.
Right,
Man,
right.
that's astounding.
So we don't exclude them. So
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no like test of membership or something, or like a questionnaire you need to fill out to make sure you have the right beliefs or something.
We could use the Humanist UK, are you a humanist
yes.
quiz.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yes.
No, we don't have that, and it would humanism can be a lot of things. We state that our humanism does not believe in, supernatural entities, and that we are a democratic organization and we are non-theistic. So that is like the core tenets of the organization. But we don't actually ask people, do you really believe
Right.
in this?
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
One of the questions we had set up was was addressing how you balance conformity and independence and things like that, which we've found is a pretty big issue here in the US, where especially after someone leaves a religion, they don't want to become a member of a group that sort of has rules and set behavior, and you need to do this and you need to do that. People really bristle against it. They find it incredibly uncomfortable. And it sounds like you've found a way to square that circle just by it having. Is it just that you've set up a very large tent with a very few rules or few ideas that hold it up, and everybody's welcome? Is that how it works out?
We have a really large tent, and we have tried to have a large tent, which is one of the reasons why we don't have a position on the right to die. We are one of the very few organizations in the Humanist International that has not taken a position on the right to die, which is, I do support that personally, and there is calls for change of this in the organizations, but at the same time, this has made the organization more welcoming to the people that are strongly opposed to the right to choose to die. At the same time, we have quite clear positions on LGBT issues, on abortion, women rights, and so on, and on, for example, nuclear weapons. So we have quite clear positions on some things, but at the same time, individual members are not obliged to keep in line with these positions that we hold. So we have quite a variety inside of the organizations. But at the same time, if I want to speak out in the newspapers, I should at least be in line with the politics of the organizations. But that is mostly like the people with positions in the organizations that are more bound to this. And of course, this is a democracy, and my boards can vote to change the policies that we have as an organization at any given time. So, but normally we're quite consistent on the positions. For example, we do not want a religion to have a favored position in the Norwegian school system, for example.
Right. Yeah. That's, man.
Which makes the job easier for me to keep remembering our positions.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. How big
Yeah.
is the leadership group in the humanists, in your humanist group, the Norwegian Humanists?
Well, there's one president.
Right. Yes.
No, I have one vice president, and the leadership group is a trio, and the board is 8 or 9 people. And then we have it's called the national board, which is the central board plus all the regional presidents. So we are 24 people in total in the national board, which is meeting on Friday. So we have a more lenient and a smaller and more lean board, which does the day-to-day business, or more often business, and we have the national board, which meets 4 times a year, which is the larger entity between the general assemblies.
And what happens at the local level?
Many places they have different. They have, of course, their local presidents, their chapter presidents, and their chapter board, and so on. And they do the confirmations and the name giving ceremonies, and then it varies a lot if they have a lot of activity or if they have just some activity or none other than the confirmations. That depends on the capacity that they have as a local chapter. But we try to make it easier for them to have events, have lectures, have debates, have just a community space to be in local parts of the country. But it really depends on the capacity that the individual members there have.
Yeah. And
So
let's go back to the top then for just a moment. What is the next thing that you hope to accomplish? What's the short-term goal?
I'm not sure if I have any short-term goals. I want to change the national laws for burials, for example, which is I have like a 30-year time period to change, I think, because before I need the change myself.
What?
But the most important thing as a president for the Norwegian Humanist Association for me is to prepare the organizations for a new period of 70 years as an organization. And we have been growing so much, we have become so available as an organization, and we are not like the punk alternative anymore, if we ever were. We are a normal part of the fabric of society. And that is different from being the rebel organization trying to change everything. But at the same time, we have quite ambitious plans for change of, for example, the constitution, how the Norwegian society deals with religion. We want the society to be an open and religiously tolerant society, but at the same time, that needs changes in, for example, how governmental institutions handles religion and how if they are favoring one religion on the cost of everyone else, for example. So that is the short term. But to ready the organizations for the next 70 years has been my big thing.
Yeah. Can I just ask just really quickly, what you mentioned about the burial, changing the laws. What did you have in mind there? What is the law now, and what do you want to change it to?
The law now is that you can have a cremation, or you can be buried in a casket and put in the churchyard or in the graveyard. And that hasn't been changed since the beginning of the 1900s, where they allowed cremations. And the composer Edvard Grieg, which you might have heard some of his music, he was one of the members of the Norwegian Corpse Burning Society. And so it hasn't been any changes since that. And for example, in the United States, some places it has now been allowed with recomposting and with water cremations and other forms of how to deal with the body after death. And the new technological opportunities here are so large that we need to change the burial law to accommodate this. And at the same time, to have people lying in graveyards takes up a lot of space, and there is a lot of nutrients that are not being able to become a part of nature again, and there is a lot of difficulties with corpses not dissolving the way they should be. So both nature and climate needs us to change these laws. So.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
But I'm a big fan of compost, so that is my gardening interest at the same time as my humanist interest.
Yes, right. Yeah.
Oh, I have a compost bin in the backyard, and I'm not going to end up there. I'm not going to.
But how large is yours? Because mine is so large that I could be buried there.
Oh my! No way.
2 times over, actually.
Wow, that's massive. Wow. Is that yard waste or is it gardening waste?
No, I do both gardening waste, yard waste, and food waste. Yeah. So we have like 10 cubic meters of compost bins.
That's big. Oh my goodness, that's huge. I hope you have a big.
So it's a big interest of mine.
Yeah,
my organization just says that we need to allow for more technological change in this. I say I want to be composted and
yeah. Interesting.
Oh my goodness. All right, Christian, I think we've got to move on to the lightning round. I think you know how it goes, right?
I know how it goes.
There are yes or no questions. There's no wrong answer.
I really disagree with you on that.
We've had a few big surprises. Okay, let's start with it with an easy one, Christian. I think you'll nail this one. Can a true humanist believe in God? It's a yes or no answer. Please elaborate in your response. Can a true humanist
That would
believe
be
in God?
really much easier if you said a true atheist. But it depends on your definition. I would say that a humanist in my organization, it would be rare that they believe in God. And humanism, as understood by the Humanist International, does not believe in a God. But of course, there are other humanists out there, and other humanists out there in my organization as well. But mostly they don't.
I like. You came on so strong, Christian. I
Yeah,
know there's a right answer, wrong answer, and then you hedge. Oh yeah, maybe some of them,
I know.
All right. Can a true humanist believe in the Norse gods?
That would be the same answer as the last one.
Are they still? I have no idea. Was there ever like Thor, and were they held as religious deities? Is there any movement for that in Norway?
I have friends that are members of the Norwegian Åsatruf Fellesskap, which is the Norwegian Norse pagan society of. I'm not sure about how to translate their name, but I don't think that they're actually a theistic organization in so much that they actually believe in the gods, although they venerate the principles and ideas and so on in some way. So that is out of my competency field.
But it's distinct from. It doesn't overlap at all with humanism. It's neo-pagan. It's a different thing.
It is neo-pagan, yeah, so it's not necessarily in the same, but probably the Venn diagram here is not that far apart.
Yeah, all right. Well, okay, here's back to a simpler one. Can a true humanist belong to a church?
That depends on how you define belong to a church. Okay, I should have not been so tough on the outside of this, but and I would say that because belong to a church, okay, I have some members that belongs to churches and so on, and they need to define for themselves how humanist they are. But at the same time, both we and the Norwegian State Church says that you cannot be part of two organizations at once. Or we actually allow for it, but they are more strict than we are. But we used to have a different payment levels for being a sole member of Norwegian Humanist Association and being members of other organizations as well. So we used to have that, but at the moment we don't. But at the same time, in practice, I belong to a church when we talk about it together with my wife, for example, because she belongs to a church and I go to that church and I participate in their meetings in some capacity. And then, well, from an American perspective, I would probably belong to that church. But from a Norwegian one, we tend to be think about the membership.
Right.
Yeah.
Can a true humanist speak out against government policies while taking government money?
Ooh.
Yes. And I do it all the time.
Okay.
No, but at the same time, as being a teacher, being a PhD candidate, all of my income comes from government money.
That's
and
true,
of
right.
course, as the organization, a lot of the money that the organization has comes from the government. So yes, we can absolutely talk out against the government and still receive money from the government.
Very nice. Okay, next one. Can a true humanist oppose a welfare state?
From a Norwegian perspective, that is quite difficult to imagine. But it is probably more difficult for a Norwegian humanist than for a humanist from other countries.
Right.
But that has something to do with my cultural upbringing and belonging to such a system. And really do think that it's more difficult for more people outside of welfare state than inside a welfare state.
Yeah. Is that
So I
something
think
that's kind of baked into Norwegian humanists? Is it sort of part of the fabric? It's sort of the like. Do you feel it's part of something that's distinctly Norwegian humanism?
I don't think it's Norwegian humanism. I just don't. I just think it's Norwegians.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Right.
There's
Yes.
there's not that many Norwegians that talk out against the welfare state as a percentage of the population. So it's just a few Norwegians in total.
Right. Right. Okay. Can a true humanist name their children with religious names like Christian?
Yes, and I have met several. No, but we have more biblical names than that, and they are normal names in the fabric of society. But of course, the local bishop, he's a good friend of mine. He's retiring now, but he's always making a joke about my name when I see him, and he really does think that's wonderful and clever. But talking to an American audience, talking to Americans, British people, of course, it's always a part of the amusement to say my name.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is ironic. It's
Especially since I'm used to introduce myself to say that I am Christian and not
Yes.
my name is Christian.
Right. Yes.
I like it. Okay, Christian, can a true humanist celebrate Yule?
Most humanists do celebrate Yule.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And I have a lot of members that would claim that the Norwegian or the church has stolen Yule. At least they appropriated the name, and then we could discuss what parts of the Yule that is distinctly Christian and what part that is distinctly non-Christian. But for most Norwegians, we see that what is important about the Yule is not the religious aspects of it, but meeting family, eating good food, giving presents. That's what's important about Yule.
Yeah. Do the Norwegian humanists have lots of celebrations like that? Do you guys mark holidays?
No, not really. We have like the Facebook pages, and I send out some Christmas cards to members, and I made a video last year and saying Happy Jule and things like that, but not a big celebration. But at the same time, in Tromsø, which is in the north of Norway, they have an alternative Christmas celebration for people that does not, for example, have families, or if they're students far from home. Or if they are poor, they can become a part of this Christmas celebration. So they are creating such an event. And many places we celebrate the winter solstice, 21st of December, by giving out, making waffles or having buns and cocoa or something, or having a meetup with the local humanist choir. We have 8 humanist or 7 humanist choirs.
You guys, Christian, you keep mentioning more and more amazing things. This is such a deep well. Man.
But that is a part of the celebrations in connection with the Jule and such celebrations. And the important thing here is traditions and making a ritual, making the day extra special. That is important for people.
Can a true humanist believe in magic?
That would be a supernatural agent or entity or something. So I would refer back to my first question about atheists. But of course there is.
Yeah.
But I guess there's quite few of them.
And finally, Christian, can a true humanist support monarchy? Oh. Did we stump you? Is this?
Yes, you did. No, the organization has no position on monarchy or republic. We have members that are Republicans, and we have members that are royalists. But I would guess that we have a larger percentage of Republicans than um, the population at large. But that is more or less, I guess, because we don't ask about that very often. But we don't have a clear position on the monarchy. But we do say that they should have religious freedom.
Yeah. That's a good place.
That is more important than having a king or not having a king.
Mm,
The king should at least have religious freedom.
absolutely.
But at the same time, the principle behind the monarchy, with somebody inheriting the position, is quite difficult from a humanist position, at least.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes.
There's that equivocation.
Yeah.
Christian, this has been fantastic.
Yeah.
Nathan, is there more? Do you have more you want to ask? Sorry to.
Maybe we can save this for the bonus. But I was going to ask if there were any ones, from previous episodes. You mentioned you disagreed with some. Maybe why don't we stick that in the bonus section? If you can tell us if there was some you disagreed with, and then give your answer. But yeah, let's do that in the bonus as a incentive for people to listen to that one. Yeah. Well,
Sounds
thanks.
Nice.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Christian. Maybe you can just tell people where they can learn more about the Norwegian Humanists.
If you want to learn more about the Norwegian Humanist, you can go to the webpage human.no, human.norway.
That's an easy one to remember. Yeah.
Fantastic, Christian. I've learned a lot.
All right. That was Christian Lomsdalen from the Norwegian Humanist Association. Really interesting chatting with him. Todd, what did you take away from that conversation?
Oh my God. Well, there's so much. It's such a rich vein. Like, it's the opposite of most of what we've been talking about before, right? Like, just going, when I think about like the things we've talked about with organization, it's beyond founding the group. It's, well, how do you retain membership, right? How do you grow the membership? How do you keep people there? And then talking about like, do we need magic? Do we need ritual? Do we need ceremonies? How do we build this culture around it? And I mean, one of the things that really stands out is for the Norwegians, they did everything backwards, right? Compared to what we've talked about. They didn't found a group and then try to incorporate rituals. They had a ritual and then they incorporated it and they made a group around it. That's pretty fascinating. That's a very, very different thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, many groups in North America, I suppose, and elsewhere, maybe in Europe, like, it's sort of now a question. And now that these groups are founded, it's a question like, well, should we start bringing in like sort of secular marriage ceremonies or humanist marriage ceremonies and so on? Whereas, yeah, I mean, like you say, it's back, like they did it, well, I guess from our perspective, from backwards. And it's interesting how much the confirmation ritual or whatever is still such a big part of their, like, the main kind of, or one of the main motivators for people to join, I think is really interesting. Whereas, I think for other people, and again, in North America, it's probably like, that's probably not the main reason one would join a sort of secular community or something.
No, yeah. I mean, a lot of it, and we've heard from people who've like, that's what they're trying to get away from, right? It's like, oh, I got to do this thing in this way at this time. And it's a completely different situation. In which I mean really stands out if you think about it, like going from how you transform from a state religion, a mandated state religion where everybody has to get confirmed, to becoming one of the most secular places on earth. And it seems like one of the driving factors in that is you have a state religion that sort of everyone has to do these actions, and you just sort of secularize them.
Hmm. Yeah, it is. It is funny. I mean, like the sort of state church. I mean, like in the UK, Sweden, Norway, it's all led to some almost like moderating influence, maybe, or like secularizing influence, maybe. Um, yeah, it's interesting. What else stood out to you?
Well, one of the things is that, like, it's really tough to sort of make this comparison across the two countries because there are so many things that are different. Having a state religion, having these things that you had to do legally to be part of the religion, to becoming you have to do it socially to just be part of society, and you have to create these secular forms of it for people to maintain, and then getting state aid, right, being recognized for that. So all these things sound really different, and then he threw out a few numbers that really, it kind of struck me that there's something the same underneath. And he was like, it's 2% of the population that is the group. But if you start doing surveys and it's like 10% believe it, 10% want to be part of it, like that's what they do. And then you have 30% who act that way, right? So, and that breaks down perfectly when we think of the 3 Bs, right? Where you have behavior, people are behaving this, 30% behave this way, 10% believe it, and then 2% belong. Well, I mean, that's astounding. And then that maps onto the US almost perfectly, where atheism is very, very small. But then you say, well, but what about the nuns, right? And then it's suddenly 5 times bigger. And then, well, what about people who just don't go to church and aren't religious in any way? And then you're back to 30 to 50% again. So it's like there is this sense that the underlying belief system is, or the amount of belief in these ideas and these principles and the way people live their lives, it is comparable to other secular Western societies. It seems like it is. They just have a group that expresses it in a very particular way.
Yeah. It was interesting too because their group is kind of centralized, perhaps. Like, I don't know if that's a good way to describe it, but like, or almost like they have a monopoly on the sort of secular game in some ways, whereas elsewhere it's so fragmented. And I don't think one is necessarily better than the other, but it is like gives it more of a coherence, obviously, to have like one sort of central structure. I mean, I don't think, like the idea of 2% of the US belonging to the American Humanist Association or something like that. I don't know what their numbers are, but I don't think it's anywhere near that. Um, but it's interesting though. Yeah. And I think, yeah, like the issue of state funding is another one too. That's interesting and like hard to, imagine really, but yeah. Yeah.
Definitely. That's that's a challenge. But I mean, there is, well, before we get into like what does it allow us to think in terms of how do people in other countries sort of mimic this success? What can we do to we can't just copy and paste it. How do we sort of get the same results? One of the things we have to notice is that like secular humanism is distinct from atheism. There is a difference between atheism, which is largely negative. If you're just thinking about atheism, it's a negative thing. It's just the one thing, right? God doesn't exist. All religion is wrong. Put that aside and move on and exist in the material world. We know that humanism is a positive philosophy. It puts a lot on top of that. They seem to go together incredibly well. It seems like a minority would not be humanists. A minority of atheists would not be humanists. It certainly seems that way, but it would also be, I think, a pretty vocal minority. We know it's not the same thing, but it's a branch of it. It's part of atheism. It's part of the atheist experience. When you start formalizing what it is you do believe, because you do have beliefs. Atheists believe things. Atheists have moral positions. You develop an ethos. You have a worldview. All of these things are inherent in the way you act and behave and conceptualize the world, whether you're aware of it or not. Most often it equates with humanism. So they're structured around a positive philosophy, and that's a very different organizing principle, which of course is what we've seen in a lot of the secular groups we talk to. It's not just
Yeah.
atheism.
Right. Yeah. And I think he made the point that it's sort of a big tent philosophy. Like they do, it's not super dogmatic. Like he talked about the positions on assisted dying or something like that. But
I
it
think
is
some of that may have
interesting.
been paywalled. Was that paywalled, that part?
I don't
There's only one way
remember.
to find out, really,
Yes.
people. We know
Yeah.
what you need to do.
Yeah, but I think yeah, it's I think there's always that balance of like when you create an organization, like you need to have enough values to make it sort of coherent, but then whenever you do that, you're always bound to also turn off some people who are inevitably going to disagree. So, yeah, but it sounds like they've struck a pretty good balance. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously.
I thought that would be something that would trip them up and be challenging and difficult and just weird. Like that idea of like, oh, how do you match group conformity, group solidarity with individual will? And it's like, well, yeah, you just let everybody do whatever they want. That's crazy. How the hell does this group function? It doesn't make sense. Imagine if you're playing sports and that's what the coach says. Oh yeah, just go out and do your own thing. We'll be
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah. I guess it's like, yeah, that's sort of almost like maybe a way of thinking. I mean, I think, he was talking about like the confirmation process and the students more like reflecting on moral issues and so on rather than being like, here's what you should believe. Um, and I think that, yeah, that's maybe a good way to think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I would have loved to have gotten into the weeds about that, about like their curriculum and what they're teaching and how they're teaching it. But it's enough to know, like, it's interesting to see that balance again between like the sort of the federated part. There seems to be like the board, what the president does and says, and how much they delegate to local groups. It's astounding that they've found that balance.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, yeah, they've been at it for, over 50 or almost
Yeah,
70 years, I guess. So,
yeah, they're looking to celebrate
um,
their 70th
and,
anniversary.
and probably there was, before then there was other traditions that helped to inform it too, I imagine. So yeah, it is. Yeah, it's definitely interesting, and I think there's stuff that can be learned from their experience.
Yeah, and
Well,
it's definitely useful to take a look at groups that do it well and see what can be learned. And it is a fantastic example. I mean, they've grown 20% in the past year. That's astounding. Like that's incredible. So it's yeah, there's definitely something there. A lot of it is not reproducible. But if we dig into it and you think, well, okay, build it around a ritual. Let's start with that. What's something that people enjoy doing? What's something we like doing? And how do we go from there? How do we make sure we keep this part? There might be something to it, right? I mean, it does also remind me a bit of like what this how the Soviets went out, the Soviet atheists who were like intent on like we need to break religion's stronghold over our ceremonies and our rituals, and we need to establish an atheist marriage ceremony, and it worked, right? I mean, that's amazing. We have, I mean, like one thing I know that well, I guess the secular humanists have ceremonies, right?
yeah, I think like most humanist groups have like humanist marriages and so on and funerals and stuff. But it seems like they in Norway like they have their rituals are more sort of solidified, perhaps.
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, that's my
it does
sense.
sound
Yeah.
pretty rigorous, like the
Yeah,
way
or
everybody
just
does it.
like or it's more like it has the tradition behind it, I guess, more than maybe other secular humanist ceremonies, perhaps like in North America or something. I don't know.
Mm.
No, it's
And it does sound like the secular humanists built a monopoly on the non-religious aspect
in Norway, you mean, or
in
here?
Norway. I don't know what I said.
Yeah, yeah.
No, and my mind
Okay,
is
okay.
already drifting off. I've been talking for 20 minutes and therefore I'm
Yeah,
confused.
yeah,
Well, I'll
yeah.
tell you where my mind went. That a family friend um, who actually ended up performing the ceremonies for everyone in my family. Um, Initially, he became an officiant because churches weren't doing gay marriages. Gay marriage became legal in Massachusetts. Churches would not do it. So he went out and got certified on the internet, and he went to the local religion store and bought all the robes and stuff. and became like this religious, like the religious guy who would do gay wedding ceremonies for extra money on the weekends. And it killed, right? He crushed it because parents wanted their kids to have a religious ceremony. Like if it's gay or straight, who cares? It needs to be good in God's eyes. And churches weren't doing it. So he had a racket going where he's the only guy doing it, right? And churches aren't doing it. So there was a space for this sort of like, I mean, that's unprofessional, maybe non-professionalized. I guess he became professionalized. He's a professional now. He's been doing it for like a decade. But like that's when that space opened, people were able to fill it. What is it that we can do as secular people? What's that sort of thing we can hijack?
It's interesting too, because for a priest or something, like it's a more easy way maybe to be like, okay, I'm a priest, so I can officiate marriages. I mean, whereas like, what do you need to do as a humanist to be able to do that? I mean, like, what qualifications do you need? It's not, or to be a chaplain or whatever. I mean,
Yeah,
that's an
that was
interesting thing.
fascinating. That's because
Yeah.
you need training.
Yeah, but it's not, and I think you need sort of probably personal qualities, I guess, that would make you a good chaplain, I suppose.
I think
But
that's true about everything.
yeah, that's true. Well, no, but I mean, but I think
Yeah, just
for a
show up and be like,
chaplain,
I'm the chaplain now. Hey
well,
guys.
yeah,
Hey guys,
you need
I don't know. You're gonna be fine. You're in the army,
because
people are shooting at you.
you're dealing with people who are going through very difficult things, and you have to have some kind of good social skills. And so I don't think I would be a good chaplain, for
No.
example.
No.
um it's just being like, the person is pouring their heart out, and I would just be like, yeah, sounds rough. I don't know. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's something about, having some kind of philosophical training or whatever, but I think it's also to kind of a temperament or whatever,
Mm.
social skills and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, but and I mean, like they're able to explicitly, like we are in, we can create chaplains who are in the military, in
Yeah.
prisons, in hospitals.
Yeah.
That's an incredible like
Yeah.
asset. That's something that you can do.
And I
Yeah.
think, yeah, we're way far afield now, but
We're getting out there. But I mean, when you have this kind of conversation, this is the good thing that develops because we're, and it's great when we talk to people who are doing things really well. All right. And it makes you think about these things and how does it translate? How do we do it? How do you try it? What do we know isn't going to work is another good thing. So but it just gets a conversation like this. It just gets your brain thinking, right? It just gets you fired up. That's a good thing. So yeah, so big thanks to Christian for coming on, dropping some knowledge. I thought everything was going to be an easy answer. I thought, we know the answer. Well, I know what he's going to say about this. I know what he's going to say about that. Nope. Every answer was curveball.
yeah, it's definitely different getting it in a sort of different context. Yeah. Um, yeah. Well, we wanted to, before we wrap up, to thank our Patreon supporters for your support, and to our audience for listening. If you want to support the show, you can also like and subscribe and give us a review, and yeah, share it with a friend.
Yep. Yeah. Also, check out some of our good friends who are also part of Atheist United, part of the Atheist United studios. Throw them a few bucks as well. Always appreciate that. If you're looking for an organization that's building and growing and doing things and you want to be part of it, check out Atheist United. Who else do we need to thank today, Nathan?
We should thank Red Japan, our band who plays the opening.
Yeah, the
We
house
haven't thanked
band.
them in a while.
Haven't thanked them in a while. They didn't seem to get
No,
upset about that though, so we can let
no,
it
that's true.
slide. They're pretty okay with that.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, subscribe, ring the bell, pull the string. Well, we
yeah.
love hearing from you guys. If you have any complaints, problems, Nath G. Alexander on the Twitters. Are you still on Twitter?
I am, yeah, for now, yes.
For now, until it falls
Yeah.
apart.
Either, but yeah, whatever happens first, whether I leave or it just collapses, I don't know.
Yeah, and you got to watch out for those other, authenticated, verified Nath J. Alexanders.
Yes, yeah, don't
Make
be
sure you get
fooled.
the right one.
Yeah, yeah.
All
Anyway,
right.
right, okay.
Until next time. Goodbye.